Welcome to the Wellbeing Show. I've got a fantastic guest on with me. I didn't ask where he's from, but I'm going to do that in a second. James Ski, which is a great name to have for me this week, as I've just booked a bit of skiing. So that's fortuitous. He reminded me. I was thinking, oh, who's my next guest? Oh, it's James Ski. Oh, shit, I better book the flight. So that was really helpful for me this morning, James. Thanks for that. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. To answer your question, I'm originally from Windsor, and I now kind of live in Brentwood, Essex, and split my time between Essex and London and Windsor. Right now, I'm very excited to be on here. I've watched a number of your interviews. It's a very natural approach that you've got, and this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. So happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I mean, you're somebody living, you describe yourself as living with bipolar. Tell us about those two words, living with and also bipolar, and what they mean to you.
That's a great question. So I often disassociate from the fact that it's a severe mental illness. And the reason being is I don't, and I'm not ill all of the time. My illness is episodic, right? It comes in waves where I can be having a hypermanic episode or be hyperactive, or I can go through depressive stages. So for me, living with bipolar more encompasses the fact that I have a deep understanding that I have a diagnosis of bipolar. I prefer that word a little bit. Like I'm diagnosed with something that
Okay.
I have to have a lot of self-awareness. So for me, while yes, it is defined as a severe mental illness, and I'm sure we'll get into the story, it's impacted me severely in my life today. I feel that it's something that I need to be responsible for and live my life in a way that I can be as well as possible despite having that diagnosis of bipolar.
That's really clear. Thanks for that. And bipolar is linked to manic depression or something, is that right?
Yeah, so manic depression was its kind of formative term, which basically the kind of model of it is someone that experienced high highs, and this is not necessarily drug or alcohol induced. It's something related to stress triggers and in your brain. And so for me, I can get these severe highs, which is the manic aspect of it, and then you can fall into the depressive lows. And depressive lows, I find much more uncomfortable, difficult, and you find yourself in a state where you can have very little hope, lose a lot of optimism for life, lose your zest, lose energy, and you don't know. In my experience, when depression is going to kind of release, and it's a very difficult state to live in. I actually and people do say this, I kind of more enjoy the hyper states because as an individual personality, I'm very outgoing, I'm very optimistic, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm motivated to achieve great things. And so that does feed me to, take on more. But unfortunately, that's also where I fall down. And an analogy that I often use to help people understand the kind of hypermanic aspect of manic depression is when I'm so excited. I like to have plate spinning. So I like china plates. I want high quality plates. I have one here. I have another here. Then I'll put one on my foot. Then I'll put another one. And then I'll add another one. And then before you know it, they're crashing. And that's kind of then what happens is you lose perspective and you burn out. And then it can lead to all sorts of other difficulties as a result of the manic aspect.
Yeah, I imagine your credit card has difficulties during that time. Sort of like,
Yeah, this is it absolutely does, and it's bizarre how spending is a byproduct of being manic, and it's unfortunate because money comes and goes very easily with
that's
me.
right.
I've been fortunately, I've had a very successful career in the software industry, and I've managed my own business for the last 6 years.
I just want to stop you there because
However,
I do want to say this. I have to say this. I'm so impressed by the way you live with this illness. And I've known many people over the years. I've been in this field 30 years. and to meet people who do manage the illness, which is I know how serious this illness is. I've sort of been around a while, and how much it interrupts people's life. But to build a life while managing a very severe condition is incredibly amazing. And I'm not saying that to say to people who haven't built a life that they are somehow failing. You're not. It's a very severe illness, which can have massive impacts. And the mania itself, let's just talk about mania for a little bit, because I don't think people really understand mania. Mania is fixed over a period of time. Yeah. It's not like I just feel really good and we can laugh and joke about these things, but it involves quite a significant risk, mania. And one of the risks is, and you're nodding away to this, is that you don't think there's something wrong with you because you feel great. It's like, and then people say, no, there's a problem. And you go, what are you talking about? I feel great. You're mad. There's something wrong with you. But mania can be quite a challenge for people to sort of get. You're nodding away. Please, do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Well, I can give you I think I'm now 37 and I was diagnosed when I was 20. That was my first hospital admission. I've been in 7 different mental health hospitals, spent over 200 nights in different hospitals over the last decade. I've been sectioned. I've been in holding cells, and I've seen all sides of the system, and I've experienced all levels of the spectrum, the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. And I definitely, fortunately, have kind of got great insight into the illness, and I can kind of get ahead of it these days. But in the early years, a good example of what used to happen, because I would be so manic and so kind of delusional, I used to drive a very small Corsa, but I believed that was a Ferrari, and I'd drive it like a Ferrari, and to the point that I'd put my seat all the way back and I'd have it like super low, and I'd drive it to the point that I would literally on the motorway run out of petrol.
Yeah.
Because I would believe that I had still enough in the tank. And that's a good example of like the mania feeding you with this delusional belief that anything is possible and you are right and nothing is wrong, and that you're going to get to where you want to go and you're going to achieve things. So there would be reckless behavior, and fortunately, I've never been harmful to anyone, and not myself, but there are risks, and the money piece as well. Even in early years where I had very little, like it was almost like I can imagine that I had it all in my bank account, and even when I had nothing in there, I could just spend and spend and spend.
Yeah.
And it's a really disorientating experience in the aftermath, because it causes chaos around you. Your family are looking at you in a different way. Doctors are looking at you in a certain way, and you can't believe it in yourself that you are experiencing this, the experience and behavior. So it's quite frightening. And I've also, in those states of mind, experienced kind of psychotic behavior in terms of thoughts and bizarre thinking, and that's frightening because paranoia hits in. And I've been in I've been in states where I've thought people were watching me, following me, trying to kidnap me. These were completely fake thoughts. And I've talked to many people that have experienced the same, and it's hard to comprehend if you've not experienced it, because it's just like I don't get it. Like, how can you imagine these things? But when you're in that state and you're at breaking point and you're running, and in my case, I've run into hospitals and out of hospitals for help, and I'm seeing and hearing things that aren't really there. That's a very frightening place to be.
And so it is a serious condition, and it can be risky, risk-taking behavior, and you can sort of end up with consequences. But you have to deal with debts, theft, all sorts of problems, maybe criminal activity while you're sort of manic as well. And I've sort of come across that, and people having to deal with consequences. So it's a very serious condition. You mentioned some words that people may or may not be familiar with. But before we go further, I'm just going to say to people who might be listening and might be identifying this about themselves or about a relative, that it is really important that you seek help, because it's a severe condition, and it just won't go away. I promise you, it sort of does need help.
Well, this is do you know what? For many years, and I'm talking maybe the first 4 to 5 years, I was just convinced that this was not a real thing for me,
Yeah.
even though I'd been in hospital, even though I had diagnosis, even though I'd met tons of doctors that sat in front of me over and over again and said, you have this severe illness, you're going to have these more experiences if you don't comply with your medication, if you don't do this, if you don't do that. And I'm a stubborn guy,
Yes.
and I didn't want to believe it. And I believe, and I think this is important, for people that might be experiencing or watching this, that I could have prevented many of my admissions if I just took the advice earlier on in my life. I've caused a lot of problems for myself and a lot of pain because I wouldn't accept that I, have even now I can't quite say the words well, but I have this illness.
Yeah, right.
So the sooner you can get on with it and accepts that it's not going anywhere, the sooner that you can learn to live with it and manage it, and that's how you're going to get a positive life. And I just will add, depending how far people get in this conversation, that you can still have a great life.
Yeah.
And despite any diagnosis, there are a lot of labels nowadays. It's very, kind of. There's a lot put on people for different conditions at different levels of the spectrum. You can still go and have a great life. You just got to learn how to navigate it with whatever you've been diagnosed with.
Here to that, really. I mean, I don't often talk about my own personal experience because this show isn't about me, but I will share these things because I think they're relevant, if that's okay with you. I don't want to take up your time.
No,
But I have,
please.
I'm cyclothemic, which, as you know, is a very mild form of the condition and really associated with my addiction. And I'm in recovery from addiction. And it's exacerbated by the use of alcohol and drugs in my case, etc. And over the years, it's calmed down. I've been in recovery 15 years now. But recently I
Wow.
had an episode of depression start a couple of months ago. And because I have insight into it, and because I have a good support network around me, I noticed it immediately, straight into chatting with my GP, straight onto meds for me. Would you guess I'm depressed at the moment? No,
You wouldn't have any idea.
no. The meds work for me. I also have a very healthy lifestyle, which is, we're going to talk about that because I can see you do. And I maximize my recovery. I maximize my health and well-being. And it means that when I have episodes like now, they are relatively brief in terms of the intense symptoms. And if you'd seen me 2 months ago, I couldn't finish a sentence because I have very severe depression. As you know how that goes. You can't think, you can't talk, you can't do anything, etc., etc. But here I am hosting. I'm off skiing at the end of the week. Now, historically, because I lacked insight and because I lacked the tools and resources to manage my condition, my episodes would last for a very long time and would be very destructive. That's the way it was. Now it's very different. That doesn't mean to say something couldn't happen, that I had a very severe episode. Maybe, who knows? But at this point, I'm living with, in the same way as you, I'm living with multiple conditions, in fact. So I just want to underscore that. So you talked about a couple of things that I wouldn't mind going into a little bit, just so that people can get some identification, I guess, with the experience. You talked about hospital admissions. You talked about a sectioning. We'll talk about what that means in a moment. And you also talked about medication and also gaining insight, which I presume you got because you have a psychologist that you work with and a psychiatrist that you work with. They work with you as a partnership, I guess. That's my sense.
Yeah.
So let's talk
That's right.
about
I mean, that took me a
hospital admissions for now. What, and
sure.
sectioning. You mean section 3 as opposed to section 2, I presume. Section 3 of the Mental Health Act, for people who don't know, gives a psychiatric institution, a regulated statutory psychiatric institution, the power to enforce treatment on somebody for generally a predetermined period of time. So it works in blocks. So, and this isn't the thing about drugs, and I'll just briefly do this so people know. So initially, when you're sectioned under 3, the hospital has 72 hours, 3 days. And the reason they're given 3 days initially is just to see whether or not your behavior is drug related, because generally after 3 days, any drugs somebody has taken will be out of their system. And then they go on to do an assessment and diagnosis. In your case, because you come with the diagnosis, they would have known what was going on after the first one. And then they have, it can be up to 6 months. I don't know how many times you had a whole 6 months, but sometimes it can be quite long and sometimes quite brief. So that's just a bit of information. And the Mental Health Act, and I will say this as somebody who's been around, I'm not a great fan of the Mental Health Act. I'm more believe in things like the Mental Capacity Act, which has just been enacted in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, to replace the Mental Health Act. We can get into that a little bit if you wish or not. So bit of information for people. So tell me about hospital and its role in your life.
Yeah, so hospitals changed my life. It changed my perspective on myself. It's given me a level of empathy on the human condition that I didn't have as a teenager. Although actually just as a note, both my parents worked in the NHS. My dad is an orthopedic surgeon, my mum as a nurse. So I've seen a lot of that A&E hospital and the physical hospital, but they're very different to the mental health institutions, and they had low to little experience of mental health. My first admission happened when I was 20. I was at university in Oxford Brookes. I was organising nights it was kind of my early entrepreneurial journey. I used to organise nightclubs and parties. And one night I'd organised this huge gathering of people, had a big guest list. But because it was the beginning of Freshers Week, no one had turned up to my night. So in this brainwave, I got into my little Corsa. I drove down the main high street. I did a 360-degree turn in my car. I climbed up on the top car, and then I took my clothes off, bar my briefs. And at this point, I'm on top of my car, trying to get the attention of the crowd. The police arrived, asked me what I was doing. I just said, I'm just trying to get people to my nightclub. They said I was crazy. Anyway, 2 days later, I ended up and I was admitted to hospital. And initially, I met with a GP. The GP said I needed to go to A&E. And I thought when I got to A&E, and they said to me, you need to go to hospital, you're either going to go voluntarily or we're going to put you there. I answered the question that I'm already in hospital. Like, where else can I go? And then they let me know, well, you need to go to a mental health hospital. And so my first mental health hospital was in Heatherwood, Ascot. I grew up in Windsor, and it was eye-opening. It was completely eye-opening at the time, and I don't think this happens anymore, but it was a mixed ward, so women and male.
You don't really
and
get. That's right, you don't.
No, you don't. But it was, a melting pot of what I would call lost souls, people that had experienced all sorts of trauma, abuse, self-harm. And if I'm honest, I was there as a well-educated student, a high-performing athlete. I used to be a rower to a very high standard. And I just couldn't work out what was going on. I just couldn't figure out why I was there. And what I didn't realize was I had experienced a manic episode. I was extremely emotionally fragile. I was having major kind of teary moments and then hyperactive moments. I was running around the hospital, literally running ragged. After a few days upsetting the nurses and other patients, I'm a big guy, you can't tell on screen, but I'm 6'4". I didn't realize, but they called me intimidating. And I was like, well, that's just not me. I'm not that type of person. And they said, well, you're aggravating other people. And that was actually thinking about it now, like very upsetting. Um, and then after maybe a week or so, um, the doctors gave me this diagnosis of bipolar. I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of manic depression. I didn't know anyone in my family that had experienced it, or at least they'd never talked about it. And this is, I think, what's definitely changed. And so that was my first experience. Now I got out of that hospital over about 10 days, and that was because my dad lived in the north of England, my mum lived in Windsor. He decided he wanted to take me out to look after me. And in hindsight, maybe we should have stayed and got proper treatment. I did get out of the hospital, but then I went into severe depression because I had to drop out of university. And suddenly I was, being described as a mentally ill patient. I was in the home treatment team. So home treatment team, care for you in the home. I was getting prescribed medication on a daily basis, very sedative medication, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, and I was a mess. And I felt broken. That was my first experience when I was 20. And then let me know what angles, because there's so many ways I can talk about the other admissions and other hospital experiences.
Mm-hmm. But tell us about, if you don't mind, because you were clearly not on a section 3 at that point, probably on a 2 for assessment and observation. Tell us about your first experience of, say, a section 3 and what that was like for you. If you're okay, I don't want to trigger any memory.
No. Yeah.
Just to let you know, there's a slight time lag in the lip sync. It doesn't bother me. I won't bother other people, but just so that you know, it's fine.
Okay. So, it's a good question. I think it was in. So I had a stint for a few years where I was quite troubled, but kind of managing it myself with little help. Then I went back into hospital in 2014, and I think I went in volunteering and got myself out of there. So I think it was 2016 now, where there was some severe kind of burnout that I experienced because of pressure that I was putting myself in my career at the time as a high-performing salesperson in a technology company. And at the time, I remember going up to visit my dad, telling him that I was ill. He sent me to a psychiatrist. I acted out in front of the psychiatrist. I didn't have a good experience with him. I ended up literally running around a hospital, and I mean literally. I'm 6'4". I was being chased by security because I was paranoid and I didn't want to be there. And then I was kind of, held and then put into a hospital holding room, which is where the assessment takes place. And then I was sectioned. And that was my first experience of being in the northern hospital. So this hospital is in Morpeth. It's the most northern mental health hospital in England. And if I'm honest with you, this sounds very odd, but it's a very special place to me. Mm-hmm. I found it incredibly helpful, therapeutic, and the staff. It's almost like after years of struggle, this place gave me a lot of support and allowed me to kind of find myself in a way that I'd not experienced before. Mm-hmm. In fact, I met a psychologist there who still works with me to this day privately. So that relationship has changed my life. Some of these experiences blur into one because there's been quite a few days and nights in hospitals, but I'm not sure. I think it was on that occasion where it was my son's birthday. I've got 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. and they weren't letting me leave because I was under section and I wasn't allowed to leave. So I decided that I was going to take myself out of the hospital, and
that works.
So what I did over a weekend, and I'm a sales guy, and I'm quite persuasive, and I know how to articulate myself. And so what I did over a weekend, I went around all the patients. Usually in a male ward, there's like 20, 25 patients. I got to know all of them because I talked to everyone, and I said, look, I'm going, and I used to joke and take the piss because they were all northern Geordies and I was a southerner, so I was out of place being in this northern hospital. And so I went around the ward and I said, look, guys, I'm off on Monday. It's been a good run. I've had some fun, and good to know you. And hopefully I won't be coming back. And I did this with the nurses as well. So I went around all the nurses and I said to the nurses, I'm going next week. So everyone assumed that I was leaving. Now, bearing in mind, you have a dedicated care team, which had no idea what I was up to.
Right.
And somehow, bearing in mind that mental health wards are double door locked, you can't walk out of these places. I was able to slip behind someone else, and I managed to get out with my bags, and then I just legged it. I ended up legging it out of the hospital. I managed to catch a taxi, got a train. I at this point was officially missing. I had been reported to the police missing. Obviously,
completely
they went into meltdown
and lockdown, just public inquiries.
big time. So what happened was,
we shouldn't laugh.
knew
it's quite serious, but it is quite funny as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I can laugh at that around, but it wasn't fun for them. It wasn't fun for my family, and it wasn't fun for me. I was still ill, so I ended up getting. But I knew I was unwell. So what I did is I went back to a hospital in Essex now. So because in Goodmayes. So like I said, I've been all over the country, and I literally arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning. So after like a 24-hour journey of buses, trains, taxis, I arrive in Essex and I knock on the door, and they're like, "Yeah, what are you doing? Visiting our suppose?" And I said, "No, I'm a patient. I'm a patient. Have you not been? Has it not been communicated that I've just come down?" Well, so not quite. So they called the Northern Hospital, who then obviously were informed where I was. My parents got informed. My partner at the time, who I'm no longer with, got informed. And then they were like, "Well, you can't stay here. We haven't got a bed for you." So I was worried to go back to, and I didn't want to frighten my young family. So I did go home, but then the police were called. And just need to put this out. It's not because I'm harmful. It's not because I've done anything ever. But when someone's unwell and in a state of recklessness, it's frightening for other people, and I understand that. So the police were called. They picked me up, put me in the back of the van, took me back to a assessment centre, and then and said, "Look, you've just escaped one hospital. You've tried to get into another hospital. You're obviously unwell. We need to do something about you." So then, while I was in the holding area, because my mind's just going so fast, I knew I didn't want to be in Essex because I don't like that hospital. I wanted to get back up north, so I legged it from this place, and I went to Gatwick Airport to get a flight. And I got to Gatwick Airport and I ordered some food, called my dad and said, "Dad, I'm getting a flight back up to Morpeth. I don't want to stay in London." And then this is when it got a bit serious. The airport police were called, and airport police are heavy duty.
They're armed.
They're armed. So they knocked on my door, and they're like, "James, you need to step away. We're coming in." And at this point, to be honest, I started shitting myself.
I'm sure you did.
And I was like, "Yeah, look,
yeah."
And I was like, "Look, that's fine. I'm not going anywhere." So then I was scooped up, and then they didn't keep me out of their sight. I was put in a assessment holding cell that was locked this time, and then I was put into Goodmayes Hospital, where I stayed, for a number of weeks. So, like, I think, what does that one, it illustrates my cunningness and abilities to kind of conjure up adventures, but actually it also illustrates the severeness
Yeah.
of how things can run away with you, and ideas that happen in seconds, you just want to bring to life, and the pace that happens is frightening, and in my mind it's me. I've just lived this life. It's not it's me, but for everyone else it's uncommon, it's odd, it's strange, it's scary, it's potentially dangerous. So that's why it's obviously considered such a severe illness.
It's also it's a good illustration of how impossible it is to live life when you're ill, because you're caught up in all these strange beliefs and delusions and incidents. And how can you build a career in that state? How can you maintain loving relationships with people in that state? So it's a great, although it's amusing, and it is amusing, it's a great story, but it's also a good illustration of how impossible it is to have any sense of a normal life, a sort of continuity, because we do need stability, we need predictability, we need to be able to not live in delusion. And all mental illnesses, and I think it's worth saying this, all mental illnesses have what we call cognitive distortions or delusions. So if you're depressed, you will have depressive thoughts, you will view the world in a depressive way. If you're anxious, it's the same. And so all mental illnesses, and everybody should know this, the person who's ill lacks insight into their being ill and need to be taught about their illness, which is, I think, the other point I want to come back to. The hospital up north, it sounds like what they did was they began with the psychologist, certainly, to begin to educate you and give you the tools and resources to self-manage. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's always very kind and impressed by the level of insight I have, they say. But it was in the north, it was in Morpeth, St George's, that they really had the structure and setup to really help me understand myself. And they also gave me the time, the space. It's a very spacious hospital. It's got really great grounds. Honestly, it's a very peaceful place, and my dad used to joke, and still does. He's like, son, if you want peace, just go on holiday. But I didn't know how to take holidays because I'm a very kind of type A, hyper-driven, ambitious individual. So I found that particular place a sanctuary. Yeah, and I even just thinking about it, because I don't think that often about it. It's been a while since I've been up there, but it really allowed me to kind of be comfortable with my diagnosis, and I wish all hospitals were at that standard.
Yeah, but it sounds more like a therapeutic community, which is ideally what these need to be, with give people a chance to get some insight. You say that that experience, to some extent, once you were stabilized again, I presume there's a story about you becoming stabilized. At what point do you think in this journey did you begin to go, right, this is it, this is what I need to do, this is what I need to do, this is what I need to maintain? At what point did that story change from one of running around the country manically to beginning to settle down into your life and get things together?
Well, at this point now, I had a young family, and it was very difficult for their mother, and I was very self-aware of how damaging it was for stability. I was very well looked after by the company I worked for at the time, LinkedIn, and I knew that this is not a life that I could continue living. And so, kind of compliance with medication became more important, sleep critical, exercise is very important to me. As I mentioned, I was a high performing athlete, and then levels of ambition and managing that ambition. But it hasn't gone away, and I've had mild blips every year, frankly.
Yeah.
And my last admission was in 2020.
Right.
So that's been 4 years. That's actually a good run for me, 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm really focused on avoiding hospital now as much as I can enjoy it and joke about it. Like, it's not productive, it's not helpful. So I go into a very quick reactive crisis situation where I'm on the phone to my psychiatrist, on the phone to my psychologist, on the phone to my team to say, look, this is happening. This is not right. Okay, take out meetings, slow down, stop this, don't do that, stop spending there. And then I can kind of manage it and calm
Brilliant. That's all I
myself
wanted to
down.
hear, because I call it my my fire alarm plan. So I've got certain things I know if they happen, I have to respond by getting hold of the medical professionals in my life, the mental health professionals. I'm just waiting to start another patch of sort of cognitive based, mindfulness based CBT for me, which has always worked with my depression and my anxiety, helps me manage it. I'm just waiting for a call back from them. And it's all part of my plan. So I have definite plans. And it sounds like you do as well. So you've got signs and symptoms. And I think it's really important people understand this stuff, that you need that fire alarm, one that you can believe in, trust, right? And I remember once, like, I've got some really good friends in my life who've known me for years and understand these issues. And I remember I was in the gym once on a running machine, and I started to get angry about this bloke, the way he was looking at me. I'm generally not like that at all, right, James? And, so I
I
was
guess
chatting
that.
to my mate on the phone going, oh, that bloke, I saw you. And she said, Noel, do you think you might be getting a bit anxious? Because I have comorbidities with anger and aggression when I get ill. I'm one of those 10% of people who have that. And so we've got these signs and symptoms, and I've got these people and things in my life. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing so that you can spot it sooner. And that's a really important message to people. The sooner you spot the symptoms, the early indications of your symptoms, that's the point at which you want the nuclear weapons to come and bomb the shit out of it. Because that gives you a fighting chance, right? And you get it.
Absolutely.
And you sounds like you've got that. The other thing is the really interesting thing, that the word stress and managing stress and the relationship with stress. Tell me about your understanding of stress and the activation of your illness.
Well, look, I believe in positive pressure, positive stress to drive outcomes and
Right.
achievement in business and life. The challenge is I, as an athlete, had a very high stress threshold to push myself to the limit and beyond, breaking point consistently to the
Yeah.
highest level, to the highest standard.
Yeah, I get that.
Now, actually, though, as a corporate person now, sits at a desk most of the time as an entrepreneur, stress can overfill. And for me, I have a fragility in my brain. Now, the doctors will argue, and they could possibly be right, that I've now damaged and created more susceptibility to stress because of the amount of recurring episodes and severeness I've had of those because of non-compliance with medication. So what that means is if the stress becomes too overbearing, that can trigger these episodes. So I have to be very mindful of what's going on personally and professionally in my life to be able to maintain as much stability as I possibly can. Now, I live a fairly adventurous life anyway. So it can be harder, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't want this diagnosis to dampen my kind of enjoyment of life, and that's sometimes hard for a lot of people because often the medication does dampen people. It takes away their creativity, it takes away their personality, but you've got to find that balance, which is very difficult.
Yeah. So thinking about stress, and I'm really interested. I'm thinking about polyvagal theory. I don't know if you've come across that. The sort of central nervous system has, I guess, 3 states. Generally, people talk about 2 states: active and relaxed. So when we breathe in, we activate. When we breathe out, particularly we breathe out through our nose and through our throat. we relax. Okay, so we're always doing active, relax, active, relax. And then there's a third state, which is overwhelm or freeze. Some people talk about it when you get overwhelmed and your body shuts down, your mind shuts down, and stuff like that. So I'm very influenced by those things. I'm very influenced by the idea of pushing myself and reframing experiences. So fear could become excitement, and that's how I managed my fear of flying. Is I decided I was excited, which I think links to what you're saying about there's a certain form of if you like, stress hormones, which are called principally cortisol and adrenaline. And adrenaline is the one that makes you go, whoa, it's like that, which is actually a performance enhancement. And it really is, because it's designed, as you will know this as an athlete, to make you run faster, hit harder, be more focused in your thinking, be more focused in your vision and hearing and stuff like that, because it's designed for fight, flight stuff. And so, yeah, it does activate us. But in the lifestyle that we have as human beings now, we can get signals saying activate, but we can't do something with that. We can't like go and hit a punch bag because we're in the middle of a meeting, and hitting our colleagues would be inappropriate, right?
Would.
So that's what we're left with, and how we manage that. Now, I guess as an athlete, you have a natural outlet for that, particularly cortisol, because cortisol builds up in our muscles as opposed to our bloodstream, and then it just sits there unless we do something about it. So you have a fitness regime, I guess. You hit the gym, you do what, boxing stuff. What do you do?
I run. I try and run 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
I go to the gym 1 or 2 times a week. I'm not as active as I'd like to be, but I'm definitely reasonably active, and that does help me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say in terms of my own life, and the evidence backs this up, having exercise in your life is one of the single biggest contributors to health and well-being. Regular exercise, 2 or 3 times a week, that's all you need, will sort of really enhance things. And it does things in terms of stress management. What else do you do in terms of using your stress positively, do you think?
I think just making choices for downtime.
Okay.
Part of me, I could work 7 days a week, because I'm very driven and passionate. But
Yeah.
having children means I'm actively focused on them, and that's kind of my downtime with them. Spending time with friends or partners like that, that's also helpful as well. So yeah, it's kind of active downtime.
What do you mind talking about this? But as a parent who lives with a severe and enduring mental illness, do your kids know about it? Do you talk to them about it?
I have. I mean, they have awareness, but fortunately, they were young when it was very severe,
Yeah.
and they've known when I've not been around, but they've been very protected by their mother, which has been fantastic. So they're aware. They don't quite get it yet. I think as they get older, all these interviews I will build up over the years, they can go and watch and learn all about it. So that's what I'm hoping. I want to be a positive example that you can get through it, and I want them to know, actually, anybody that questions my sanity or behavior, I'm still a good guy trying to do good by them. So
Yeah.
that's what I hope they take away from it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a major achievement to sort of have that insight as a parent and understand what this can do to kids as well, and sort of to work for your health and well-being because it's in their favor as well, which is great. And your partner, did you say their mum is
So
the partner?
yes, yeah. So I'm no longer with their mother. We're separated. We have been for many years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've got someone in my life.
And they understand what's going on. You've informed them. You've given them knowledge and
Yeah.
tools and resources, and I guess they're part of. I had a couple on who one's an ex-copper, one's an ex-prison officer, and she was medicaled out of the police, and she has the same disorder as you. And we've discussed at length what it's like to live with this with an intimate partner, because inevitably the people that love us are drawn into sort of our need to maintain our recovery, right? And
Yes.
it's wonderful. I mean, I'm genuinely bowled over by your story. I love it. I mean, I'm just so happy that you're here and you're discussing as the way that you are, sort of living with this very severe condition. And it's a real inspiration, James. It really is. I mean, extraordinary.
Well, I've enjoyed this conversation. I haven't actually, not many people have taken me on these kind of angles for a while. So I really enjoyed the conversation. Oh, thanks for having me on.
Brilliant. And can people book you as a speaker? Can they ask you to come on? How do people
Yeah,
get hold of you and find out about your work?
yeah. The best way to find me is search James Ski on Google, or find me on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
James Ski, SKI. And my core business is sales confidence, but I also do paid public speaking and coaching. So, if anyone's interested, or like, I'm just happy to help anybody that's trying to navigate this themselves in terms of bipolar, and also their family members, because I've been there. So, I'm very accessible and happy to chat.
It's just wonderful. Really, really impressive. And just want to sort of thank you so much for being with me this morning. It's really made my day, actually. I was like, because I was kind of going, where is this bloke? And then you emailed me saying,
Well, we're
have
here.
you got the link? Where is it? And I was like, oh, great. Okay. One of those classic things. So really wonderful to have you on. I'd like at some point, and I'll ask my PR team to get hold of you maybe in 6 or 7 months' time, and just circle back and see how things are going, and sort of
Sure.
and sort of get you back on, because there are certain people, and I think you're going to be one of them, that I like to revisit on a regular basis, because the recovery matures, right? And we get new
Absolutely.
lessons
Absolutely.
all the time, and sharing those lessons are really important, I think. So a really astonishingly positive message from you this morning. And when it goes out to air, I hope it sort of gets out to a lot of people who need to hear it. And I guess the central messages for me are that if we choose to live with these conditions, we can, but we do need support. We have vulnerabilities. We need to have a great insight into what our own particular vulnerabilities are, and we need to adapt our life to protect us, protect the vulnerabilities, and enhance those features of our conditions that are to our benefit. And to your benefit is the fact that it's made you a sort of incredible salesman. If you can blag your way out of a hospital ward, like, you're an amazing salesman.
It's not bad. Yeah, it's not bad.
It's really
Uh,
sort of, I'll give you a contract to sell stuff for me on the basis of that alone. It's really impressive. So
uh,
it's been
yeah.
wonderful that you stay here. Listen, folks, it's been great to have you here. I hope you've enjoyed the show and found it as useful as I have. I'll see you all at the next Wellbeing episode. So bye-bye for now.